Hello everyone, welcome you all. In the today's video, we are going to learn a very important topic, which is data-driven testing in Selenium. So we can achieve this by using Excel file along with TestNG DataProvider annotation. Now, as a first step, we will see how we can do data-driven testing by using TestNG DataProvider. And afterwards, I'll also show you how we can read the data from Excel and how DataProvider will use that particular data. Now let's get started. So before that, let me show you an application which we are going to automate. So I have a small application. So admin.nocommerce.com.login. So I want to test this login with multiple sets of data. So I can pass email address and password and just perform the login test. And here I'll perform positive and negative testing. So I'll pass some of the inputs are valid, some of them are invalid. So both the cases, I will test this particular test case. Okay. Now let us go to Eclipse, and because we are going to write our TestNG test case using Selenium, so we need to set up our project with our Selenium. So for that, what I can do is, so we already have Apache POI package, which contains all the Excel related jar files. Now I'm going to add Selenium WebDriver jars to this particular project. So for that, what we can do is we need to download Selenium WebDriver jars. Just go to Selenium official website, selenium.dev, and just go to Selenium WebDriver download, click on download. And here, if I just come down, you can just download Java version of WebDriver. So you can just click on this download, which will download a zip file, which contains so many jar files. And we need to extract that particular zip file. Just look at this. I have just downloaded, and when you extracted this, and you will get a new folder like this. Inside that folder, you can find two jar files. Inside this lips also, you can find multiple jar files. So we need to add all these jar files to your project. Now let's go to Eclipse, and now I'm going to add those jar files. So right click on project, go to properties. So I already downloaded those jar files. I'm just attaching them. So go to properties, and which will give you a new window. Go to Java build path. And here we have to add all the jars under library section. Just go to add external jars. Now here, if I just go to my drivers folder, so I already copied earlier my Selenium WebDriver jars. Now we can just look at here. So this is Selenium. Yeah, this is the one. So Selenium Java 3.141, and also have latest version Selenium Java 4. So you can take anything, no problem at all. So I can just take this two jar files and adding first. Then click on add external jars and go to libs folder, select all of them. I say okay. All right, so with this, we have done Selenium setup on my Java project. Now we are ready to write our Selenium test cases. So apart from this, we need to also have TestNG. So for that, what I can do is I can just add TestNG library to this project. Again, go to right click on project properties. And in the same Java libraries, Java build path and libraries, here I'm adding add library and select TestNG as a finish. And now we can also download TestNG jar file, and you can also add here. All right. So if you are using Maven project, you can just download dependency for Maven pom.xml, and you can add the dependency in the pom.xml. And you can get that from the Maven repository. I'll say mvnrepository.com, and just type Selenium Java, and just Selenium Java. You can get this and click on this. And once you click on this Java, these are the different versions are available. And whichever version you want, just click on that version, and you can get this dependency and add that into pom.xml. Okay. And similarly, you can also get the TestNG jar. You can just say TestNG, and this is my TestNG. Click on the TestNG. Now click on this, and you can add this dependency in the pom.xml. So in that case, you don't need to add library to the project. So now I have a small project, and I already added Apache POI libraries and Selenium libraries. Everything is there. Now I'm going to create one basic test case, data-driven test case using data provider annotation from TestNG. So before that, this is application which I already shown you, and this is the login part I want to automate. And before that, we need to have test data, right? So I already have some test data which is prepared. So let me just show you the test data, how I have prepared. So I have just opened my Excel file. So this is my test data, which contains a number of usernames and passwords. And here I'm just putting some result like if I pass this combination, this is a valid data and this is invalid data. This is also invalid. This is also invalid. So I have used multiple combination because I want to perform positive as well as negative testing, like valid username and valid password, valid username as invalid password, then invalid username and valid password, and both are invalid. So I have taken 4 combinations, and you can add more number of combinations of data here. And you can also put one column here, whether they are valid data or invalid data, because we are also going to use this in our automation. Along with this data, we are also going to check this to perform some negative testing. Okay. So I'll show you at the end of the video, you will understand exactly how we can use this data in our test case. And this is my Excel data, which contains, and now let's directly go to Eclipse and go to SRC. And under this, I'm going to create a new package. I name it as data driven testing. I say finish. So this is a new package which I have created. And after that, inside this package, I'm going to uh, write a new test case. So right click here, new class, and here I'm giving, I'll say test, data driven test, and let's say finish. Now I'm going to create a TestNG test case. Okay. So we don't have main method, we have only test methods. Now inside this test case, I'm not going to use Excel for now. As a first step, I'll show you how we can perform data driven testing by using data provider method. And after that, I'll show you how data provider method get the data from Excel file. Okay. Now, so as a first step, what I will do is I'll create a public void setup method. And this method is responsible for setting up the driver and launching the browser, all these things. And I'll execute this method before class. I'll say this is before class I'll execute, then import this before class from uh, testng org.testng.annotations. And I'll also create one global variable called Webdriver, and driver variable I create and import this Webdriver from org.openqr.selenium. All right. So once you created this driver variable, I'll initiate this inside the setup method. So as a first step, what I want to do is we need to also set the property of the driver. So system.setProperty, and this is a class or key, webdriver.chrome.driver, and the location of my driver. So after that, I'll initiate this driver equal to, I'll start with a new Chrome browser. So I'll say new Chrome driver. This is my new Chrome driver class. And this will internally invoke the default constructor and which will launch our browser. All right. So once it is done, so before that, we need to download this Chrome driver.exe, and which is also required to work with the Chrome browser. Okay. So these are all prerequisites which we need to have before itself. So if you don't know how we can do that, I can show you. Just go to even Selenium official website. And if I just come down to this page, you will get browsers list, and here Selenium will show you all the what are all browsers which is supported. And if I just go to Chrome, click on documentation here, and they will provide the links here. So you can just download, and the latest stable release is this one. So it's 87. And before that, cross check your browser version. Just go to help about the Google Chrome, and you can check the version of the Google Chrome. Accordingly, you can download the driver. You can just click on the zip file, and it will download the zip file. And once you extracted this, you can find Chrome executable file. So you can see here inside this. So I just opening the file, and inside this folder, you can find Chrome driver.exe. So this is the driver which is required to work with the Chrome browser. So I have already downloaded. So I've just provided the location here along with the key, and then this will launch our browser. And after that, I'll also put some implicit weight, because especially we're working with multiple pages and we are navigating between the pages. So I'll say driver dot manage dot timeouts dot, I'll say implicitly wait, and I'll say 5 seconds max. I can say you can give any time. So I can just say 5 seconds. I'll say time unit dot seconds, I said. Okay, so this is how I can put implicit wait. So this implicit applicable for throughout the script. So as soon as the driver is alive. Right. So after that, I can also maximize the browser. I can say simply driver dot manage dot window dot maximize. So this will maximize the page. So all the basic stuff I have done in the setup method. So I want to execute this before class. When I say before class, this particular method will execute only once before starting the class. All right. So then here I need to write exact test method. So I can say public void, I say login test. This is actual test method. I'll implement this later. So for now, I can just define this with the test annotation. Now import this. So once you created this, I'll implement this code later. So before that, I'll implement a data provider method. So this login test will execute multiple times. I want to execute with multiple sets of data. So that particular data will be generated by data provider annotation method. So now I'm going to create a new method called data provider method. So let me just create data provider method. So data provider method, how we can create? Just like a normal method, I'll say public get data, and here we need to write the code. So here this particular method can read the data from third party files like Excel file or Notepad or whatever, and we can also hard code the data within this method. But you have a 2 to 3 inputs, you can directly hard code the data in the method, but sometimes doesn't good. Like in that case, you can just have the data in the Excel file and you can read the data here. But as a first step, we will see how we can hard code the data in this method itself and how this is going to provide the data to the other test method. Okay, once we understood this concept, then we will see how we can get the data from Excel, and we use that Excel data into the test case. So remember, data provider method is always return two-dimensional array. Okay, so two-dimensional array. So here I'm defining a string type of two-dimensional array is a return type. So inside this, what I will do is I'll create a two-dimensional array. I'm taking string. You can take any type of array, depends upon your type of data. So I'll say username and password I'm going to take. So username and password is basically strings. So I'm just creating the two-dimensional array with the string type. So string, say login data. This is my two-dimensional array, and in which directly I'll assign the data. Okay. So if I just look at my Excel file, so this is the different combinations of data I have. The same data I will directly hard code in my data provider method, and username, password along with this result value, because this is my expected data. Like if I pass this combination, this is a valid data and this is invalid data. And if I pass this combination, my test should fail. When I pass this combination of data, it is invalid, so it should fail. And if my test case should fail, means my test is passed. So this is a kind of a negative testing. When I pass invalid data, the application should not log in. If it is should not log in, means my test case is passed. Okay, that's a kind of a negative testing. So I need to also read this. So all the data I'll keep in my two-dimensional array. So what I can do is I can just put this data here. Okay, so this is my data which I kept in my two-dimensional array. So later I'll show you how we can get this data into this array from the Excel file. Okay. Now finally what I will do is I will just return this login data. Return, I say login data. Okay, that's it. So this is our data provider method. But how TestNG will know about this? This is the data provider method. So we have to add a special type of annotation, which is data provider annotation. Data provider, and we should also give some name, because sometimes you may have multiple data provider methods in your test case. So you can just identify them by using name. So you can just give some name, log name equal to, I can say login data. Some name I have to give. And what is the use of this name is, for example, this data provider method is providing the data to the login test method. But how the login test method will know about this data provider method? Maybe there are multiple data provider methods may have, but how this login test method will know about which data provider method is providing the data? It doesn't know it, right? So for that, what you can do is we have to refer this name inside the test annotation. So I'll say name equal to here, not name, data provider. I said data provider equal to, what's the name we have given is login data. So that I have to refer. So this way, the login test method will get the data from the data provider method. So data provider method will provide the data to the another test method. Okay, now we have done with the data provider method, and then I should implement this login test. So now let us try to implement. So how many parameters we are passing this data provider method? For example, if I just look at this, this is the 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 inputs are providing. So how many inputs we are providing here, those many times the actual test method will repeat and execute. Okay, so we have to receive these data in 3 different parameters. So let me just create 3 different parameters. So one is, I'll say string user, and the second parameter is also string password, I'll say pwd, and the third parameter is something called expected data. You can just put, let's say, expected. Okay, so how much data we are passing? 4 different combinations of data we are passing through data provider. So the login test method will execute those many number of times. Okay, now we'll see whether it is working for now or not. I'll say string experience. So I'll just test this with by putting sysout. I can say user, and I'm just concatenating for now, just for checking whether this data I'm getting or not. Okay, just printing that. Okay, I just put setup method which will execute first, and after that login test method will repeat multiple times by taking this data, and after that I'll write one method called, I'll say, tear down, and I'll execute this after class. So after class, and inside this I will close my driver. Okay, that's it. So import this after class. So just I have not completed, I have not implemented this test as of now. Just I'm checking whether this data is coming here or not. And test method should automatically repeat multiple times, depends upon the number of inputs which are passed by or which are provided by data provider method. So that is the use of data provider method here. So without using any looping statements, we can repeat this method, test method, multiple times with multiple sets of data. So first time what happened, this particular data will be sent to the login test and will receive it in these 3 variables. And I'm just printing here. And the second round, which will get the another round of input, another second record, and which will assign these variables and again print it. Similarly, rest of the data also we are getting into this method. And how many combinations of data we are passing? There are 4 combinations of 4 inputs we are passing. So our test method should execute 4 different times. Now let us test this, and later I'll implement this actual test. Let's run as TestNG test. So now it is starting as a TestNG test case, but it is just launching my browser, but I'm not currently doing anything on the browser. Yeah, now we can just look at this. See this? We got all the data from the data provider. So we can just look at this. First round, it is taken this data. This is a combination of data. And second round is this one, third round, and fourth round. So that means 4 rounds of execution happened. So this particular method is executed 4 times, and by taking different sets of data. And till now, perfectly fine. And you can also see the output here. Every time it is taking different sets of data. All right, so now this particular data we are getting here. Now I have to use the same data to perform the data driven testing. Okay, so now what I will do is, instead of printing this, I'm just removing this. Now I'll try to automate this test case. And this is the application URL. Let me launch my application here. I'll say driver.get, and this is my application URL. And after that, there are some fields by default displaying here, populating, and then I want to clear them. Then I can pass email and a password. So for that, what I can do is, let us inspect this element, and you can find something called ID. You can just get the ID and locate that element. I'll say driver.find element by.id, and say ID, and store this element in one variable. I'll say web element, and this is my text box email. So I just created one variable because I want to perform multiple actions on this element. So I'm just storing that into a variable. So let's take this element txt email dot. First of all, I'm just clearing the data, existing data, And then I'll pass whatever value I'm getting here. I'm just passing that into the variable. And similarly, you can just get the another element, and the ID is password. Let's take that ID, and here I'll say driver dot find element by dot ID. You can pass ID and get this element into some other variable. I'll say web element. This is also text box. I'll say txt. I'll say password. Right. So now I want to clear this element first, dot clear, which will clear the existing data. And then I'm passing a value, whatever I'm getting as an argument. So with this, we have passed username and password. And then what I have to do is we need to click on the login button, and just click on the login button and go to the grow path or whatever you want and get the XPath for that. So how to get the XPath for this? You can just right click and get the XPath. If you don't have any idea or anything, you can just use any other locator. I'm just getting the XPath of this element. And here I'll say driver.find element by dot XPath. I'm just copying the XPath. It's giving absolute XPath. Okay, no problem. And if you use this one, select as hub, that will give you a good number of locators. And what I will do is I can just go to select our hub. Now you can see which is giving some XPath, relative XPath, okay, which is a little bit shorter. So I'm just going to use it. All right. And then I'm performing click action on this. So this is a submit button, or you can say login button. All right. So with this, we have done with the flow. So once it is click on this login button, if I provided valid data here and here, then it will successfully log in and will get the dashboard page. And if the data is invalid, then still be there in the same login page. Okay. So let us assume it is successfully login. And then immediately what I will do is I'll get the, this is my expected title after successful login. And how to capture the actual login. So we can say driver dot get title. So this will give you the title of the page, and I can store that in one more variable, create one more variable string. This is my actual title. All right. So now I have actual title and expected title. So after clicking on the login button and verify these two titles are equal or not. And if both titles are equal, then I can say my test is passed. Okay. So this is a normal flow. But sometimes what happens is we have some negative kind of testing. So for example, even though if we pass some invalid, even though if we pass valid data, sometimes it may not be successful. That time the title will not be matched. And sometimes what happens is if I provide some invalid data, still it will able to log into application. So that is also incorrect. So to cover positive as well as negative testing, so we have to prepare data properly. Okay. So which will cover positive as well as negative testing. So if I just look at my Excel file, I have covered positive and negative test cases, all kinds of input. So these three are invalid data, and the first one is a valid data. So what is my expectation here? When I pass this valid data, my login should be successful and title should match. When I pass my invalid data and it should not be logged into application, that means title should not match. That's my expectation, right? So to understand this better, I can write simple a flow chart here. If I just look at this, when I pass valid data, if the login is successful, there are multiple combinations we have covered, guys, because most of the people will just focus on only positive testing. They just pass some valid data, and if it is working fine, that's it. But we should also carefully check the with invalid data. So that we can say the complete kind of data driven testing. Okay. So when I pass valid data, if the login is success, that means title is got matched. If yes, then I can say my test is passed. When I pass valid data, okay, login is not successful. If the login success is no, then I say fail, because when I pass valid data, login should be successful. When I pass invalid data, should not be successful. So when I check the first scenario here, valid data when I pass, login success, we need to verify. That means title is matched or not, we need to verify. If the title is matching, then I can say it is passed. If the title is not matching, then I can say fail. This is a positive testing. Now come to the negative scenario. When I pass invalid data, login is successful. When I pass invalid data, if the login is successful, that means title is matched, then what? Our test should fail. That means what? Our test case is failed, because when I pass invalid data, login should not be successful. But if it is successful, that means test case is got failed. When I pass invalid data, if the login is not successful, no, that means my test is passed. So positive and negative scenarios, both are covered. So in that way, we need to write a conditions here. We should not check only the positive. No, we need to also verify the negative data. So for that, what I can do is, and if I just look at this data, we have also passed the third field, which is saying valid data or invalid data. Okay. So after getting these two titles, we need to write proper conditions. Okay. So the first condition I'm writing with this. So first let us verify this particular part. So when I pass valid data, login is successful, then my test is passed. If the login is failure, then if the login is not successful, means my test is failed. So this is a positive input. Now go back, and the third field is saying valid data or invalid data, right? So we already captured that into this third variable inside this method, username, password, along with the third variable. I'm just using this particular variable to check whether it is valid data or not valid data. So here I'll put one condition: if expected value dot equals expected value, which is equal, suppose a valid. Okay, expected is valid. So when I'm passing the valid data, observe this condition. So I'm passing the valid data. If it is a valid, how we will know that whether it's valid or not? I'm getting the user password along with this valid or not. So, right. So here data itself, I mentioned valid or invalid. So based on this field, I can check this is valid or not as per my expectation. So if the expected dot equal to valid, so if it is passing this data, username and password, and if it is a value is valid, exp value is valid, then what I have to check, the login is successful or not, I need to check. So there are two conditions we need to write. So first condition is valid data or not. If the data is a valid, then I need to again check two conditions: login is successful or login is not successful. If the login is successful, then only I can say my test is passed. If the login is not successful, then I can say my test is failed. So I need to verify this condition now. So data is a valid. Then one more condition is if expected title dot equals to actual title. Okay. And then what I have to do now? So both the conditions are verified. That means what? Valid data or not. If it is a valid, then login success or not. If the login is successful, then what I have to do? I have to say passed. So that's the one combination. So first condition is valid. Title is also matching. So here I can say my test is passed. So immediately I can write one assertion. So asset dot asset true is, I say true. I can pass true. So this we have to import from TestNG. So not from JUnit. So assertion you have to import from TestNG. And if login is successful, right? So if the valid data I'm passing, title is also matching, means login is successful. And after login is successful, then I have to come back and take another input, right? So after successful login, what I have to do? So after successful login, title will be matched. So the title of the dashboard page will be matched. So after matching it, what I have to do again, I have to go back to the login page to get another input. So I have to click on this logout link, right? So this is just a link text. So if these conditions are crossed, means I am able to log into application. So before doing assertion itself, I say driver dot find element by dot link text, and here I'll say logout. So logout is my link text and say click. So with this condition, what we have achieved is this part we have achieved. We have validate or not. If it is valid data, login is successful, yes, then passed. So this part we have achieved. So valid or not, if it is a valid, then titles are matching, then assertion is true, test is true, and click on the logout. And the second condition, suppose valid data, login is not successful, then what I have to do? My test is failed. So if it is a valid, but the titles are not matching here, then I'll put one else condition. Else, immediately I will fail my test case. Asset dot asset true of, I'll say pass false. So this will make my test method failure. So with this, we have achieved the positive testing. So this part we have done. This part we have done, the upper portion. Okay. Now, so we need to verify the negative testing. Now, when I pass invalid data, if the login is successful, yes, then my test is failed. When I pass invalid data, my login is not successful, then my test case is passed, right? If I pass invalid data, login should not be successful. If login is not successful means my test is passed because I am passing invalid data. So negative testing. So this part we have to cover now. So now continue with this. So if data is valid, we have verified two conditions here. Else, if expected dot equals to invalid. Suppose I am passing invalid. Okay. If this condition is true, it will verify these two. If this condition is false, what? Then I'm verifying one more condition. Expected dot equals invalid. Then I need to verify two more conditions. So if I pass invalid data, login is successful means it is failure test case. And if I pass invalid data, login is restricted means login is not successful means my test is passed. So two conditions I need to verify. Now the first condition, invalid data. So if expected equal to invalid, then login success or not, we need to verify. How will verify? We need to again check the title. So if expected title dot equals to actual title, what does that mean? Even though if you pass invalid data, titles are matching means what? My test is failed. So immediately I will fail my test. Immediately I will fail my, because here I'm passing invalid data and titles are matching means successfully logged in. It should not happen like this. In that case, we should make it as fail because it is already logged in. I need to come back to the home page to get another login. So what I have to do, we need to also click on the logout link here. So this will come out from the login page, come out to the login page, and then it will fail the combination. So with this, we have achieved the first combination. We pass invalid data is true. Login is successful, yes, then failure. So data is invalid, titles are matching, means login is successful. I say fail, the first condition matching. So when I pass invalid data, titles are not matching means not login. That means what? Our test is passed. So that is second combination. When I pass invalid data, login is not successful, no. Login success, no. Then my test is passed because there's an invalid data. So here I'll write one else condition. Else, simply I can write asset dot asset true of true. This is a negative condition. Okay. So this is how we can validate the login is successful or not with valid data as well as invalid data. So in the data, the third field will be very, very useful. So this field says like this data is valid or not. So before writing the test case itself, we have to prepare this test data. All right. So after completion of whole thing, so with this, we have done with the test case. So till here, this is all about login test till here. So this login test method will execute multiple times by taking these three inputs from the data provider method. So data provider method will return this two-dimensional array. Suppose if you have multiple type of data, like currently I have all of strings, then I define this array as a string type. And suppose if you have combination of data, then you can define this as an object array. So you can just make it as an object array. So which will hold all kinds of data. So currently I have only string type of data. So I can just look at this string type of data. All right. So this is how we need to implement data-driven test case by using data provider method. So this data provider method will provide the data to this login test and which will repeat multiple times, depends upon the number of inputs we are passing through data provider method. Okay. So here I haven't used Excel file. I just taken the data from the data provider. I hard coded some data. Okay. All right. So let's try to execute and see how it is going to work. So right click, run as TestNG test. All right. So now it is launched my web page. Here is my first input. So successfully log into application. Then it should click on the logout. Yes. Now it is taking another inputs because they are invalid, not able to log into application. Yes. Now we can just look at this. What is saying here? All of them are got passed. So this is our expected. So why all of them are got passed means when I pass this valid data, my login is successful. That means it is passed. When I pass invalid data, my login is not successful. That means what? Our test is passed. That's our expectation. When I pass invalid data, login should not be successful, right? So that's our expectation. So it is not login. That means indirectly my test case is got passed. Similarly, rest of 3 inputs I pass invalid data. So login is not successful. So finally my test case got passed. So in all the combinations, my test case got passed because these 3 are negative inputs. When I pass invalid data, login should not happen. If it is login happen means what? Our test is failed. If the login is not happen means what? My test is passed. Okay, so this is how we need to perform the positive as well as negative testing. So till this, what we have achieved is we just created one TestNG test case in which we have used data provider method, which will provide the data to the another test method, and which is executed multiple times, depends upon number of inputs we have passed through data provider method. Okay, now I'll just move on to the next step. So currently we have put the data in the data provider method directly here. Now I want to take this data from the Excel file. I want to read this data from the Excel file. Then how we can do that? So whenever you do data-driven testing using Excel file, most of the times we will create a utility file. So in the utility file, in the sense, we will write a common methods like reading the data from Excel, counting the number of rows and counting the number of cells, or writing the data into the Excel cells. To perform these common operations, we will most of the times we will write a utility file. Okay, so to perform those operations, we have to create one utility file. So I'll tell you why exactly utility file is required, because which will simplify our script and also it will reduce a lot of effort for us. So let me just tell you why exactly that is needed, why exactly we need a utility file to work with the Excel file. Okay, that's most important to understand before directly jumping into the code. So let me just give you a small scenario here. Let's say I have 5 to 10 data driven test cases. Let's say I have test case 1 here and test case 2, test case 3 and test case 4. So let's say I have multiple data driven test cases. Normally in the data driven test case, what you will do is when I take one test case, what this test case contains, there are 2 kinds of scripts I can write. One is some piece of code will be interacting with the web UI or application, like finding elements, performing actions, all those things. Some other piece of code will work with the Excel file, right? Opening the Excel file or opening the Excel file in push stream mode, or writing Excel or reading the data, counting rows, counting cells. So to do all these things, we have to write some piece of code. So Excel related operations, to perform Excel related operations, we will write some piece of code. So if I include everything in one test case, your test case will become little complex. So we need to write a code for interacting with the application. At the same time, you should also write some piece of code which will work with the Excel file, which will operate your Excel file. So same thing you will have for every test case, because all our data driven test cases, you will have the same thing. So in this problem, in this particular approach, the problem is normally what are the Excel operations you will do is, normally what you would do Excel operations, you will just read the number of rows, or you will count the number of rows, count the number of cells, and reading the data from the Excel cell and writing the data. So these are the only common operations most of the times we do when you perform the data driven testing. So these operations are common in every test case. So that what you will do is we will create a separate utility file which contains reusable methods. So for every operation, we will have a separate methods. This is just like a Java class. In this class, we will write a few number of reusable methods for each operation, like counting the number of rows, counting the number of cells, getting the data, or writing the data. For each operation, whatever you want to do, we will create some reusable methods in this utility class. And now in every test case, we will have the code which will just interacting with the UI. And whatever Excel operations we want to do, we have to just call the method from the utility class. In every test case, we just call the method from the utility class. So by this approach, we can achieve one thing is, the same code we are reusing multiple times. So reusability we can achieve. The second thing is, it will reduce the complexity of your test case. If I include both the code in every test case, the code will be increased and it will be become very complex. So to avoid the duplication, like same number of operations we are doing in every test case. So instead of writing the code multiple times, you can just write user defined methods in the utility file. We can just call those methods in every test case, and then we can achieve the data driven testing. So this is an approach most of the times we follow when you're automating the data driven test cases. Now we'll see how we can achieve this. So now I'm going to show you first step how we can create a utility file. So in the previous videos, I have already shown you how we can perform different type of operations on Excel file. And even in the utility file also, we are going to do the same thing. But here we are going to write different type of methods. Now go to your Eclipse and let it be this test case like this. Later I will come and update this. So currently we hard coded the data here. We have to read this data from the Excel file. Okay. So before that, I'm just going to introduce one utility file. Now here I'm going to create which is a new utility file and which will perform Excel operations. Okay. So I will name it as Excel utility. This is the name of the class I'm giving, and just say finish. And this particular class is just a utility file which contains a reusable methods, and we have to just call those methods whenever you want. So let me just have that file. So I already have this file. Let me just copy this. And I'm just going through this each and every step in this file. It is very easy to understand if you watch my previous videos of Excel series, and it is very easy to understand. So Excel utility. So here I have defined some common variables which are required. So most of the times we use file input stream, file output stream, accesses of workbook, access of sheet, row, cell, everything, right? So I define all the required variables in one list as a beginning itself. Then I created one constructor here. Okay, so what this constructor will do is, whenever I created an object for this class, we have to pass the location of the Excel file. So this constructor will take the path of the Excel and assign the path to the local variable, which is path. So this is a class variable. So with this constructor, we will initiate the location of the Excel file into this variable. Now there is one more method called getRowCount. So these are all user defined methods. We have just created our own methods. GetRowCount. So what this method will do is, which will take a sheet name as an argument. And finally, it will return the row count. How many rows we have in this sheet will be counted and return that row count. So how it will do it? Again, we already opened the path, right? We have already assigned the path. So that file will be opened in the file input stream. From that file, get the workbook. From that workbook, get the sheet. From that sheet, it will find out last row number, that is a row count. And we are closing the workbook, closing the file input stream, and finally we are returning the row count. Simple method. Okay, so when I call this method by passing the sheet name, which will return the row count. This is one method. And the next method we have is get cell count. So when I call this method, which will return a cell count, but what are the arguments it will take? Sheet name and row number we have to pass. So when I pass a sheet name and row number, which will get you number of cells present in this particular row number inside this particular sheet. So which will open the file input stream. So this path we already initiated through constructor. So we no need to pass the location of Excel in every method. So it will open the file in the input stream mode, then which will get the workbook here and get the sheet here and get that particular row. So we have already passed row number, and which will get the row number. And from that row, it will get the last cell number. That is exactly number of cells present in that particular row. And finally, which will return cell count. And before that, workbook and file input stream will be closed. So this particular method, when I call, I have to pass sheet name and row number, which will return cell count. This is one more user defined method. And then we have one more method called get cell data. So most of the times we use this method, get cell data, especially when you read the data from Excel. So this particular method will return the data from the cell. And what are the argument which will take? Sheet name, row number, column number or cell number. So when I pass these three parameters, which will return the data which is present in this particular cell. So how it is going to return? First of all, it will open the file in the input stream mode, then get the workbook here, get the sheet, and here it will use the sheet name which we have passed, and it will open the sheet. From that sheet, get the row by passing the row number here. From that row, it will get the cell or column based on the column number or cell number we passed. From that cell, we have to extract the data. So normally cell contains a different type of data. Sometimes you may have a numeric data. Sometimes you have like a formula cells. Sometimes you have a string type of data or date type of data. You can find different type of data in the Excel cells. But while reading the data, we will read everything into one string format, common format. Because anyway, in our application, we are going to pass only string data. So that's the reason whatever data we have in Excel sheet, we can read all the data in the same format, which is string format. So to do that, we have a special class available in the Apache POI, that is data formatter. So for data formatter class, we have to create one object of formatter equal to new data formatter. And inside the formatter method, there is a format cell value method. And what this method will do is, this particular method will return the data from the cell in the string format. So this is the description of this method. So return the formatted value of the cell as a string regardless of the cell type. So cell type can be anything. It can be numeric or string, Boolean, formula, whatever. Finally, we will get the data in the form of string. So I just created one variable called data, and from the formatter object, format cell value will get the data from the cell and store that into data variable. Suppose if the cell is empty, cell doesn't have data, in that case, this statement will throw some exception, and catch method will handle that exception. And internally what I'm doing is I'm assigning some empty value, double quotations. If the data is available in the cells, the data will be read and stored into this variable. If the data is not available in the cell, then this will throw some exception. In the catch block, I'm adding some empty value. And if the data properly assigned, the cell is contains the data, so catch block will not execute. So finally, this data will be returned. Okay, so here I have handled the empty cell data. So if the data is if cell is doesn't have any data, and I make it as empty, and then I'm returning it. So this is a method which will get the cell data. If I pass sheet name, row number, and column number, which will return cell data. So this is the one more method. And cell data. So this is another method I have. So in this method, what we are going to do is we are writing some value into the cell. Okay, sometimes if you may write results back into the Excel file, in that case we can use it. Set cell data. So this particular method will take the sheet name, row number, column number or cell number, and data, which data we want to update. So it will take 4 parameters. Then what this will do is set cell data. So if you want to set the data in the cell, first of all, we need to get the file, get the workbook, get the sheet, get the row here by using this row number. And from that row, get the cell by using this column number or cell number. And inside the cell, we have to set the value. So take the cell object here, set cell value, and I'm passing the data. Whatever data I'm getting here, I'm passing the data. But once you set the data, we have to update this in the Excel file, right? So we need to open the file in the output stream mode. So again, I am opening the file in the output stream mode. Then I'm writing the workbook into the write file. Then I'm closing the workbook, closing the file input stream and output stream. So this particular piece of code will set the data into the cell based upon the argument we passed. And the next method we have fill green color. Sometimes if you want to apply any color on the cells, like foreground color, we can call this method, which will take the sheet name, row number, and cell number or column number. When I pass these 3 arguments, which will apply the color on that particular cell. And what this will do basically is, which will open the file in input mode. It will get the workbook here, and which will get the sheet here based on the sheet name, and get that particular row based on the row number, get the cell based on the column number or cell number. And inside the cell, I want to apply the foreground color. So to apply the foreground color, we have a method called workbook.createCellStyle. workbook dot create cell style. So this will return cell style object. So this style variable we already created at the beginning. If I just look at here, I already created cell style variable, and that variable I'm using it here. Workbook dot create cell style, which will return the cell style, store that into this variable. Now after that, by using this style object, I can set fill background, fill foreground color, indexed colors dot green, get index. So here finally we have to pass the index of the color. So how we can get the index of the color is indexed colors dot green, whichever color you want to apply, you can just take the color dot get index. So this will get the index number. Accordingly, it will apply the foreground color. And how we can make this foreground color? Solid foreground color. So style dot set fill pattern type equal to solid foreground color. So this will basically apply the foreground color on that particular cell. And then the cell style I need to apply to the cell. So whatever cell I got it here, that cell dot set cell style, and whatever style I have applied here, the style I have to apply in the cell. So whatever style I have configured here, that style we have to apply on that particular cell. So for that I use set cell style method. So after that, closing the workbook, closing the writing the workbook into the file, closing the workbook, closing the file input stream, closing the file output stream. So this is a code which we have written for filling the green color. Same thing for filling the red color. Sometimes if you want to update failure messages in the Excel, you can apply red color on that cell. So the same method again, only thing is instead of changing this green, I just change it into red, and rest of the code is exactly the same. Okay, so these are user defined methods we have created in the utility file, and this will very helpful when you perform the data driven testing. Now let us use this utility file to get the data from Excel file or Excel sheet, and we use the data as part of data driven testing. Okay, now let us move on to the next step. So earlier, I have already shown you here called data driven test case we created, setup method, login test, and data provider method also we created. And this data provider is hard coded this data, and depends upon the number of inputs, our test login test is executed multiple times, right? So we have already seen this. Now I'm just going next level. That is, instead of hard coding this data, I want to read this data from the Excel file. Okay, I want to read the data from the Excel file. So I already have Excel file with the same data, username and password, and result or expected data, valid or invalid. So I want to use this data to perform the data driven testing. Okay, so now what I will do is I'll just copy the same file in my project folder, so that whatever the files which are related to project should be part of your project itself. So I already have data files folder. Inside the data files, I'll keep my login data.xls. Now let me open this file. Okay, so now I open this file. So here I'm not able to see. Let me just open as a system editor, open with system editor. Okay, so now this is my Excel file. So which contains number of rows. And if you have any unnecessary rows and columns, you can just remove like this. So I have few username, password, and valid or invalid flag. So now I'm going to read this data and check my test case. So close this file for now. All right, so I just comment this one till here, right? So now I will get the data from the Excel, all right? So to get the data from the Excel, right? So what we have to do is we should again maintain the two-dimensional array, because finally we should have the data in the two-dimensional array itself. So we need two-dimensional array. Okay. So let's see how we can do this. So let me just create a string two-dimensional array before that. So once you created your string two-dimensional array, and which is also having same number of rows and columns. In Excel file, how many rows and columns we have? In the same size, we have to create this two-dimensional array. So I'll create this later. So first of all, I will define the location of my Excel. I'll say string path equal to, where is Excel file? My Excel file is present under data files folder. So let me just locate that. So // dot // which is representing our current project directory. Inside this, my file name is, my folder name is data files. And inside this, my file name is login data.xlsx. All right, so this is my path. So now once we get the path, the first thing what you have to do is, this time we are going to use utility file. Okay, so this time we are going to use utility file. So to access the methods from this utility file, how we can access them? We have to create an object of this class, utility class, and then we can access all these methods. So let me just do that. So here I'm just going to create Excel utility. Okay, Excel utility. I'll name it as Excel utils. Excel util, some variable name. Excel util equal to new Excel utility. And when I create an object for this Excel utility, right? Excel utility, this is expecting some parameter here, default constructor. So it's not default constructor. It's taking some argument. So what is an argument it is expecting is path of the Excel file. So now I'm passing this path into this constructor. So now I created Excel util object, and through this object, I can access all the methods which are created inside my utility class. All right. So let us do one by one. So before reading the data from Excel, I need to know how many rows and how many columns we have, right? For that, what you have to do is take this Excel util object dot, just call the method get number of row, get row count. So the first method, row count. When I call this method, which is expecting the name of the sheet, so I'm passing the name of the sheet. Then what this will return? This will return number of rows present in Excel file. Now let me store that in some variable. Int, I say total rows, total rows. Similarly, I want to get the number of cells in that particular Excel or number of columns. So which method I have to call? Get cell count from the utility file. So Excel utility or get cell count, and how many parameters it required, and which is expecting two parameters, sheet name and row number. So sheet name is a sheet 1, and I'll say row number, let's say pass 1. So this will return number of rows. So I'll say total columns. Okay, now I got the rows and columns directly. So I just call the method from the utility file, and which is return get row count and get cell count. Now with the same size, we have to create a 2-dimensional array, because as soon as we read the data from the Excel, we have to store that data in the 2-dimensional array. And finally, we have to return the 2-dimensional array to the test method. Okay. So now I'm going to create a 2-dimensional array with the same name, login data 2-dimensional array equal to new string of, and how much size it should be? Equal size, total rows and total columns. Equal, okay, equal size. Like how much data we have, how many rows and columns we have in Excel, the same number of rows and columns we should have in our 2-dimensional array. So I have just created, and this is a string type of array. This is string. So this statement will throw some exceptions. Just add this. Okay, done. So now we got the rows and columns from the Excel file, and also we created one 2-dimensional array with the same size. So what is the next step we have to do is we have to just read the data from Excel and keep the data in the 2-dimensional array. Okay, so it will be like this, guys. Suppose I have an Excel file like this, which contains a number of rows and columns, and with the same size we created a 2-dimensional array. With the same size we created a 2-dimensional array. And if I just look at this, in Excel file, the first part is a header part. So I just ignore it. So from the first row I will start, and here index will start from 0 in arrays, 0, 1, 2 like this. But here this is a 1, 0 I have eliminated. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 0, 1, 2 like this. So whatever data we have here, I want to store this in the 0, 0 position. And again, 1 and 1 data I want to store in 0, 1 position. Similarly, by using a loop statement, I have to get each and every cell into 2-dimensional array like this. Okay, because having the same size. So let's do how we can do that. Let's see that. So let me just clear this. Now I'm writing two different loop statements are required. We need two different looping statements. Now the first loop is representing the rows and the other loop is representing the cells in each row. Okay. Now let me write a loop statement here. So I'll say for loop. Inside this, I'm writing one more for loop. Now in the outer for loop, I'll start from first row because if I just look at a Excel file, the first part is a header part, right? So in Excel file, the first part is header part. We don't need that. If I just look at this Excel file once again, and the first part is header part, I don't need. From the second row, I need. Second row in the sense, index will start from 0. So we need to start from 1. So here int I equal to 1. I say I less than or equal to, how many times we have to repeat depends upon the total number of rows. Then I plus plus. Every time I'll increase the row by 1. And after that, come to inner for loop. And this is representing the number of cells. So I'll start from int, I'll say j. So int j, I'll start from 0 itself because we don't need any header, nothing. So we have to start from 0. Because of we are starting from 0, here we have to use only less than total number of columns. And then j plus plus. So this will increment the cell every time. And then here we'll get the data from Excel and store the same data into the two-dimensional array. So by the side by side we have to do. Now, how we can get the data from Excel? So again, we have to use utility.java file. If I just go to this utility file, we have a method called get cell data. So when I pass sheet name, row number, column number, which will give you the data from the Excel. So that particular method I'm just going to call. So here, how we can invoke this? By using Excel util object. So Excel util dot get cell data. Get cell data. And we have to pass 3 arguments. Sheet name. What is the sheet name? Say sheet 1. What is the row number? Here I representing the row number. So I'm passing I. J representing the column number. I'll pass J here. Fine. Then as soon as I get the data from this cell, where exactly I want to store? I want to store in two-dimensional array. So here I'll say login data. This is my two-dimensional array, login data. And in which position you have to say. So here I and J, because we have just ignored the first row in Excel file because it contains a header part. Right. So, but when storing the data in the login data, always we need to do -1 because currently, if I just look at this, we have ignored the header part. So this is 1 and this is a 0. But when you store this data in the array, we are going to store in the 0, 0 position. Okay. So for that, what you have to do here, I is equal to 1. And here we have to do -1. Then it becomes 0. So in the first array, we say I -1. And here in the 0 position, here also it is a 0 position. So J value as it is, we can pass. So I -1 always it will take and J value will take. So here I'll say I -1 and here I'll say J. Because in the Excel file, we have just ignored the header part. So that's the reason we need to do I -1 here, because here we are starting from 1, which will store in the 0 row in the array. This is the login data. So once this loop is completed, so first time row is 1 here and the column is 0. Now from the first row and 0 column, it will get the value and it will store in the two-dimensional array, that is 0 row and 0 column. Second round, the for loop, inner for loop will repeat multiple times till it completes all the cells from that particular row. Once it is completed, then outer for loop will increment the row and again come inside and read all the cells from that particular row. And like that, it will repeat multiple times inner for loop and outer for loop, which will read all the data from Excel and keep the data in the login data, which is two-dimensional array. So by the time this loop is completed, the login data is having all the data from Excel. And once you get the data into the login data array, finally I'm returning this array. Because this is a data provider method, we no need to repeat this. We just return the login data, which is two-dimensional array. And our test will receive the data in 3 parameters. Then we'll use the data in our test case. Okay, so this is how we can directly write the piece of code in the data provider method, which will read the data from Excel and pass the same data to the test method. So instead of hard coding this data, we can get the data from Excel. And main thing is we have used utility file. So how we have created utility file is very, very important. And the same utility file you can use in multiple data-driven test cases. Okay, so that is how we need to do that. Let me save the file, then execute our test case now. Before that, I'm just closing my Excel. And validations and all we already seen in the first round itself. I have shown you how we can validate if the data is a valid, title is equal, then my test will pass. And data is a valid, but my title is not matching, means not successful, means my test is failed. One validation. The second validation, if data is invalid and still title is matching, means what? Test is failed. But data is invalid, but still login is successful, means so data is invalid, and login is successful, login is not successful, means my test is passed. So this is a positive and negative testing, both have covered. And when you perform data-driven testing, especially, this is most important. Okay, so you need to cover both positive as well as negative inputs. All right, so now let us execute the test case, and which will read the data from Excel now, because I have commented this code. Okay, let's try to execute as a TestNG test. All right, now it is started and it is launching my browser. Yes, now it is taking the first input, which is a valid data. So which is login to application. Yes. Now again, it is click on the logout. Now it is taking another inputs. Basically, they are not successful login because I provided invalid data. So when I pass invalid data, login should not be successful. Then my test is passed indirectly, right? The same thing is happened. So all the combinations are passed and tested, and all the combinations, my test is passed. If it is not login in the sense, my test is passed because I pass invalid data. So when I just check the condition, same thing. When I pass valid data, right, login is successful, then my test is passed. When I pass valid data, login is not successful, then my test is failed. Similarly, when I pass invalid data, login successful, overall my test is failed. When I pass invalid data, login is successful, login is not successful, then my test is passed. So valid as well as invalid case, which is very, very important. Okay, so that's all how we can do data-driven testing by using TestNG DataProvider along with Excel file, and we use Apache POI methods. And most important thing is utility file. So this utility file will help you a lot while performing the data-driven test cases. Okay, so that's all for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.